Aloha. My name is Kathleen Storm, and this is Lāʻieikawai. Her story comes from the most ancient Hawaiian tradition, the oral traditions that have been handed down through centuries, generation to generation. And I found it very compelling with the voice of the ancestors to spend time in that area. About a year and a half ago, I had a virtual studio meeting with some art curators in Hawaii. And in that, I started talking about this newer process of painting, a newer phase for my work, where I spent deep research and reading in the earliest writings, the earliest photos of people in Hawaii, and also the stories of some of traditions, but also of the environment. So what came to me as important to share is this phrase in my head, and it sounds really simple. You don't know what you don't know until you know. And once you know, you cannot not know. Again, it's really simple, but learning about Hawaiian traditions and Hawaiian history and the stories that shape contemporary Hawaii is something that's really important to me to understand and spend time with the earliest stories and the history to be able to share these in my work. So honeycreepers, our native forest birds, was an example. They're sacred in ancient Hawaii traditions as sacred birds in the upper forest lands, and their feathers were made in capes for ali'i, ali'i being the highest chiefs. And the color mattered. The sacred golden o'o bird has yellow golden feathers, and those were made for the king and queen and their children, and on. And alongside of that is that these birds have this incredible story of evolution from a rose finch, a simple rose finch that made its way here. And they have this diverse list of species, group of species of birds that evolved actually very quickly to adapt to the Hawaiian environment. And what is important to know is that they have been threatened to extinction with foreigners and colonization, and how that's impacted the environment and the earth here, and the changes in ways of sustaining the earth. So learning the ancient Hawaiian traditions of malama aina, of caring for the earth and having this reciprocal relationship with the land as opposed to taking. And what was brought with foreign people coming to our land here is that the way of thinking changed. So this knowledge for me kind of wraps around another word, which is hidden, in that you can live here and not know. You can live here and have the sunset. You can consume the experiences and not necessarily know this deep, rich, beautiful history that lies right underneath and that forms this place and this culture that we enjoy and have the privilege of being in. So this was that conversation, and the idea of hidden became really intriguing to me. Lāʻieikawai is a story that I had never known. And I asked a Hawaiian friend, a girlfriend, do you know the story of Lāʻie, which is the shortened version of her name? And she's known as the princess of the rainbow. And she said, I've never heard of it. That reinforced a feeling that I had because I'd never heard of her, that it's a story that may have receded in the minds of the people here. And what I found in my research is that it indeed appears that way. It was told generation after generation in this oral history, and which is a very sacred way of storytelling. And when there was the written language, very early in those days, a gentleman by the name of S.N. Haleole was born. He was born in Kohala on the island of Hawaii, the year that Kamehameha I died, in the land and the place that Kamehameha I was born. And this was just a few years before missionaries arrived in Hawaii. Haleole came to Maui and went to Lahaina Luna for school. And after he graduated, he came to Haiku, which is very close to here, and I happen to live in Haiku, and he was a teacher. His love for his people and for Hawaii was so deep within him that he wanted to share the stories and anchor them in the written language so that they would be here for generations to come. And when he was in school, just to give an indication of who he is, he's a very early historian, Native Hawaiian. He went to school with David Malo, another historian who's very familiar to a lot of people. Now, it's been important to me to spend time with the Native Hawaiian voice and historians. And when Haleole decided to tell stories of the ancient Hawaiian tradition, he began with Lāʻieikawai. Lāʻieikawai. There are two forms of storytelling in the ancient traditions of Hawaii. One is the mo'olelo, which is, I heard described as history in disguise. They're about actual events, actual people, actual places, and the story is wrapped with those events and those people. A ka'au, which is, this story is a ka'au, is similar. You'll recognize places. There's usually a moral underpinning, and yet not everything is true. So this story is the first work of literary fiction that was published by a Native Hawaiian. And so in telling the ka'au, Haleole first produced them in a series and serial version in a newspaper. And then and that was in 1862 and 63. And in 1863, after that was completed, he published this book in the Hawaiian language for the Hawaiian people. About 25 years later, another Native Hawaiian published this story, an abbreviated story in English. And that was King David Kalakaua. What's interesting about that is a tiny little story that we'll pull back in, because at the end I'll tell you this story to this scene, is King Kalakaua was out with friends, and they were out in nature, and they saw this pond, and he was looking at it, and he saw this sort of rock outcropping beside it, and he was intrigued because it made him think about this story. So he was talking about, I wonder if this is the place, because it was on Oahu. And one of the men that was with them, he is a Native Hawaiian, he dove right in. And he swam down, and they couldn't see him, so they were kind of worried about him. And in a few moments, King Kalakaua was looking at a little crack in the rocks, and he could see him. He had swam down into this opening, and ended up in a cave. So that will come full circle in a moment. So King Kalakaua was reminded of this story because of this place, and he put it in his book that he published in 1888 of the legends and myths of Hawaii. And I believe it's the first time it was written in English. The point where it was fully translated, Hale'ole's words carefully translated and put into context, was by Mary Warren Beckwith. And that was in 1919, which is 100 years after Kamehameha I died. And she is known for working through the Bishop Museum and for being an anthropologist and with ethnography of the time, and helping those of us who don't speak the Hawaiian language to understand her traditions and the words of the native Hawaiians and their context. So the book I have here is her translation. The story of Lāʻieikawai begins with a very high ali'i couple. The husband was ruled over 2 large districts on Oahu, and he and his wife, earlier in their marriage, he said, our marriage is really good, and I'm happy about that. And I look forward to having my firstborn being a son. We must have a firstborn son. A female firstborn was not allowed. About 8 years later, his wife becomes pregnant and she bears a daughter. The daughter is taken away and killed. She has 3 more pregnancies, each a daughter, each more radiant and beautiful than the one before, and each time they're taken away. She becomes pregnant a 5th time. And she's bereft. She's devastated each time. So she goes to a kahuna, which is a priest in the kapu tradition. And she says, I'm pregnant and I need to know, is this a female or a male? I can't go through this again. And he says, when you feel the first pangs of labor, come to me and I will tell you. So she does just that. She feels the first pangs of labor and she comes to him. And he says, okay. She says, is it a female or a male? I don't, And he says, show me your hand and I'll tell you. She lifts her left hand and he says, you're going to bear a girl. Because she showed her left hand and not her right. So she's devastated and she says, I don't know what to do. I need to know what to do. I can't go through this again. And he says, when it gets close, send your husband out to go fish with his favorite net for the ohua, for you to eat. And when your child is born, hand her to me and I'll protect her. So she does just this. She tells him, go with your favorite net and go fish for the ohua so that I believe it will help my labor. So he does. And he's out fishing and he hears 2 claps of thunder. And he thinks, my child has been born. Because thunder is symbolic of the birth of a high ali'i. Also symbolic of a high ali'i is a rainbow, particularly one that shines straight down. So he hears the 2 claps of thunder. Meanwhile, she is giving birth. Lāʻieikawai comes and she hands her to Waka, Lāʻie's grandmother. And Waka takes her. A second child is born by surprise, a twin sister. and she is Lāʻieikawai, Lāʻieikawai. She's handed to a grandfather who takes Lāʻieikawai. They go to separate places, and they are to be raised in secret, in safety. The first place that Waka takes Lāʻieikawai is that pond with the cave. And she raises her there for a good long time until there's this prophet that starts seeing this rainbow. And he knows what that rainbow means. And he sees that it shines not just when it rains, not just when it's misty. It shines when things are calm, and when there's a storm, it shines during the day, it shines during the night. So he knows that that's an important sign. So he starts moving towards the rainbow. And in doing so, he puts into threat Lāʻie's safety. So Waka begins to take her and move her to try to find a new place of safety. And what I love about this is that we're on Oahu, she travels to Molokai, Kalapapa and Molokai, and she travels ultimately to Maui, Haleakala, and the prophet's seeing the rainbow over Haleakala, and he's paddling and making his way. She ultimately lands and finds a place and creates a safe place for Lāʻieikawai in the upper forest of Puna. It's a place called Paliuli, and this is the Garden of Eden in the minds of the Hawaiian people. There are different places called this, but this is a very special one that's known to this story and as a sacred space. So she builds a home for Lāʻieikawai, and it's thatched with the golden feathers of the o'o bird. And the o'o bird is this bird here, with just a few golden yellow feathers under the wing. And when, as you remember, the golden feathers create a garment or anything, it is a sign of the highest ali'i. So to thatch a house in these sacred golden feathers is indicative of her value. Waka uses her magic to create this home, and she also uses her magic to have the forest birds come and attend to Lāʻieikawai's every need. They feed her. She rests upon their wings. They take her places, and she's resting on their wings. They hold the ohia lehua blossom and the dew. They shake the dew onto her head, and it creates this rainbow about her hair. So she's in the midst of the upper forest of Paliuli, of the Puna district. And the other thing about the mist, this is a bit of magic about her, is that she is shrouded in mist. When she travels in particular, she is shrouded so people cannot see her in movement. They can't see her travel. They can't see where she's going until they can see the rainbow. So here she is in this painting. In that place, you can see the o'o feathers around the edge, but you can also see the golden glow inside. The i'iwi she's resting on their wings, and there's something else about Waka that I want to share. Waka is known in lots of stories and mythology. She's known as a mo'o. A mo'o is a lizard goddess. And she's able to take the form of the elderly grandmother woman and also the mo'o lizard at will. So here she represents her protection for Lāʻia, and you also see the shaft of the rainbow shining down through here. There's this story, this is actually almost the beginning of the story. And I want to share a couple of things, which is the story is like a saga. Mary Kawena Pukui has this proverb that she shared that I want to read to you, so I hope I get it right. Pua ka wili wili nanahu ka mano. When the willy willy tree blooms, the sharks bite. Which means a beautiful woman attracts young men, sharks, who become fierce rivals over her. That's very much what this story entails. And I want to also share Haleole and his intention in writing this ka'au. And I want to do him justice as well by sharing a bit of his writing. This is the first book printed for the people of Hawaii in the delightfully educational form of the ka'au concerning ancient matters of this native nation. In order to prevent the loss of its fascinating traditions, let us show in fine language the words and deeds of a certain beautiful and greatly loved daughter of Hawaii, and so that the aloha of the people of Hawaii for their ancestors and their homeland may live on forever. When I think of a ka'au, I think about historical fiction and how historical fiction often, if done well, reveals so much more than a documentation of history. It shows how people lived, and you can sort of live with them in that time. You can imagine what it felt like. You can see their traditions in action in ways that other forms don't allow. And I believe that this is why Haleole chose this story to share for his first published writing. Things are hidden. She is hidden. She's hidden. What is hidden? What is precious? What is precious is hidden. And for me, the knowledge in Hawaii and opening your heart and mind to lean in and try to understand and open yourself to the knowledge of ancient Hawaii is a place where what is hidden begins to surface for you. And what begins to surface for you pulls you on a journey towards the next thing and the next thing. And it's a delightful journey. And it's my hope that this journey for me in learning this story and wanting to spend time with her and to capture this moment in her story, if it in any way intrigues you, intrigues someone, and they want to learn more, I promise you it's a beautiful journey.